There is a rule buried in the fine print of nearly every retirement plan in this country, and it says, in language so dry that nobody bothers to read it, that the company holding your money can stop you from touching it whenever they decide the moment calls for it. Not when you decide. When they decide. And the man who understood this, the man who saw it coming before the analysts on television ever said a word, were not economists. They were not fund managers. They were 60-year-old men standing in a parking lot outside a plant that used to make something, watching their retirement statement freeze on a number that used to be real. You have probably never thought about this because you were told your whole life that a retirement account was yours. Your name is on it. Your years of sacrifice built it. Every paycheck, every bonus, every raise you didn't spend on something that would have felt good in the moment, all of it went into that account instead. And somewhere in the paperwork you signed on your first week of employment decades ago, in a font too small to bother with, there was a clause that said, none of that matters if the plan administrator decides to lock the doors. Let me tell you about a man named Harmon. Harmon is 61 years old. He worked for the same manufacturing company for 34 years, rising from the floor to a supervisor's office with a window that looked out at the parking lot he used to park in as a younger man. He did not chase stock tips. He did not day trade. He put a steady percentage of every check into his 401k for 3.5 decades, and he split it exactly the way every financial advisor on every morning show told him to split it. Spread across funds, never touching it, never panicking, letting the years do the work. Harmon was the definition of doing it right. And 2 years before he planned to retire, his company announced a restructuring. The plan was frozen. Not stolen. Frozen. Withdrawals halted. Loans against the balance suspended. The number on his statement stayed exactly where it was the day the freeze began. While the market kept moving without him, and while he sat at his kitchen table trying to understand a letter written by lawyers whose job was to make sure he understood nothing at all. Think about what that means. The one man in that building who never gambled, who never leveraged himself, who built exactly the nest egg he was told to build, was the one man who discovered his money was never fully his to begin with. Here is what should make you angry about that. It is not an accident, and it is not new. It happened before, to men exactly like Harmon, in a year you probably remember living through, even if you didn't understand at the time what you were watching. Go back with me to 2008. A man named Bellamy worked for a mid-sized manufacturing company in the industrial Midwest, the kind of place that had been in his family for 2 generations before him, the kind of place where the parking lot filled up before 6 in the morning, and the men who worked there measured their lives in decades, not in job titles. Bellamy did what the company encouraged, what the match program rewarded, what every retirement seminar in that building's break room pushed hard for years. He put a heavy share of his 401k into company stock, because the company matched contributions in company stock, and because leadership stood in front of employees year after year and said the same 3 words: we believe in ourselves. In September of that year, the value of that stock began to collapse, falling by more than 60% in a matter of weeks. And Bellamy did what any rational man would do. He tried to move his money out before it hit 0, and he could not. The plan was in a blackout period, a routine administrative freeze that happened to fall during the exact week his life savings were disintegrating, and by the time the freeze lifted, there was almost nothing left to move. Bellamy was told this was bad luck, timing, an unfortunate coincidence of a scheduled administrative window and a market collapse that nobody could have predicted. But you have to ask yourself the same question Bellamy asked himself at 2 in the morning for months afterward, sitting in his kitchen with the television off, doing arithmetic that never got better no matter how many times he ran it. Who benefits from a system where the account holder is the only person in the transaction who is not allowed to move? The answer is the same answer it always is. The company that employed him got months, in some cases years, of extended headroom to manage its own collapse, without a mass exodus of retirement funds accelerating the fall. The institutions holding the plan collected fees the entire time the money sat frozen, unable to grow, unable to protect itself, unable to do anything but wait. And the man who built that account with 30 years of restraint watched it happen from the outside, locked out of a door with his own name on it. That is not two separate stories, Harmon's and Bellamy's. That is one design, tested on different kinds of men, in different decades, arriving at the exact same conclusion. The mechanism is identical today. Only the names on the letterhead have changed. And here is the part of this you need to sit with, because it applies to you whether your account has ever been frozen or not. The freeze is not a bug in the system. It is a feature that was built in on purpose, disclosed and language engineered to be skimmed past, and defended in court successfully over and over as a legal and permitted use of what is technically the plan administrator's discretion over your account, not yours. You spent your working life being told that patience was the strategy. Contribute steadily. Do not panic. Let the market do what markets do over long periods of time. And all of that advice was true as far as it went. What nobody told you was that patience only works if the door stays open the entire time. Nobody told you that the same system, encouraging your discipline, had already written itself an exit. That made your discipline optional the moment it became inconvenient for someone else. Let's talk mechanically about how this actually works, because once you see the machinery, you cannot unsee it. A 401k is not a vault with your name stamped on the door. It is a trust administered by your employer or a third party your employer selected, governed by a document most participants have never read in full, containing a section, standard across the industry, that grants the administrator authority to suspend transactions during what is called a blackout period. These periods are supposed to be rare, brief windows used for legitimate administrative reasons, a change in record keepers, a switch in investment lineup, routine maintenance. In practice, the blackout period is a legal, disclosed, fully permitted tool that can be triggered by the exact kind of corporate turmoil that makes a participant desperate to move their money in the first place. The rule was written to sound procedural. It functions, when it matters most, as a lock. This is not a conspiracy. Nobody in a smoke-filled room decided to specifically target men like you. It is simpler and, in a strange way, worse than that. It is engineering. A system was built to protect institutions during moments of maximum financial stress, and the individual account holder, the person whose actual life savings are inside that system, was never the priority the engineering was designed around. You were never the client. You were the asset being managed on behalf of someone else's stability. Let me introduce you to a second man, because Harmon's story and Bellamy's story might feel, so far, like a story about one specific kind of mistake. And I want you to see that this trap does not require you to make a mistake at all. A man named Doyle spent his career doing the opposite of Bellamy. He never trusted a single stock, not even his own employer's. and he spread his 401k across a diversified set of target date funds, exactly the way every piece of modern financial guidance told him to. Doyle did not chase returns. Doyle did not concentrate risk. Doyle followed the instructions to the letter for 26 years without deviation. And when the fund company managing his target date fund merged with another firm during a period of market stress, his account was placed into an administrative transfer freeze while the two companies' systems were reconciled, a process that was supposed to take days and instead took the better part of 3 months, spanning the exact window in which he had planned to begin taking distributions to cover a medical expense that could not wait for a system reconciliation to finish. Doyle did not gamble. Doyle diversified. And Doyle still discovered that the one thing no diversification strategy protects you from is the plan itself deciding you cannot have access to your own money. Here is the part that should make you uncomfortable. Harmon put his faith in steady contribution. Bellamy put his faith in his employer. Doyle put his faith in diversification, the very advice designed to prevent exactly the kind of disaster that happened to Bellamy. 3 different strategies, 3 different kinds of caution, one identical outcome. That is not coincidence. That is a system with a single design principle sitting underneath 3 different marketing stories. And the principle is this: your access is never guaranteed. Only your obligation to contribute is guaranteed. You have felt something like this before, even if you never had the words for it. That splinter feeling, the one that shows up somewhere around your 40s and never fully goes away, the sense that you are doing everything correctly and somehow still one piece of bad timing away from disaster. That feeling is not paranoia. It is pattern recognition. Some part of you has been watching men like Harmon, men like Bellamy, men like Doyle for years, and some part of you already suspects the rules were never as solid as you were promised they were. And here is the deeper truth underneath all of it, the one that connects a frozen retirement account to something much bigger than retirement accounts. Every dollar you cannot immediately access is a dollar someone else has leverage over. Every account where withdrawal requires someone else's permission is an account where you are not, in the fullest sense, the owner. You are a beneficiary of someone else's discretion. And a man whose financial life depends entirely on someone else's discretion is not, no matter how large the number on his statement reads, actually financially free. This is why the men who carry real authority, the ones who walk into a room and do not need to perform for anyone in it, are almost never the men with the biggest statement balance. They are the men who cannot be frozen. Men who build liquidity outside the system that can lock a door on them. Men who diversified not just across funds, but across custodians, across account types, across the very structures that decide who gets to say yes and who has to wait. That posture, the quiet, unbothered command some men carry into any room they enter, is not a personality trait. It is the visible symptom of a man who does not need anyone's permission to access what is his. The reason that posture works is not because of manners. It is because of math. Think about the 2 men in any room. One of them has a large retirement balance entirely inside a single employer-sponsored plan, subject to blackout periods, administrative discretion, and fine print he has never read in full. The other has built the exact same size nest egg, but split it deliberately across accounts. No single employer, no single custodian, no single administrative decision can freeze all at once. Both men might look identical on paper. Only one of them is actually sovereign. Only one of them can never be told to wait. You are not being asked to distrust every institution that touches your money. You are being asked to notice something that has been true this entire time and was simply never said out loud. A retirement account concentrated in one place, governed by one set of rules you did not write, is a liability wearing the costume of an asset. It performs security while quietly manufacturing dependency. And dependency, once it is deep enough, does not need chains. It only needs a blackout period at the wrong moment and a letter written by lawyers whose only job is making sure you understand as little as possible about what just happened to you. Harmon is 63 now. His plan eventually unfroze months after the crisis that triggered it had already passed, and the balance that came out the other side was smaller than the one that went in, not because Harmon made a mistake, but because he was not permitted to move while the mistake was happening around him. He still works part-time now, not because he has to for money exactly, but because the freeze took something from him that a later recovery in the account balance could not fully return. It took the certainty. He describes it, when he describes it at all, as the difference between a house you own and a house you are renting from someone who can change the locks whenever they decide the timing suits them. But here is what Harmon understands now that he did not understand 3 years ago, and it is the same thing I want you to walk away from this with. The freeze was never really about his account. It was about proving to him and to every man like him that ownership inside these systems has always been conditional. And once you actually see that, once you stop assuming the account with your name on it behaves the way ownership is supposed to behave, you start making different decisions. Not desperate ones, not paranoid ones, deliberate ones. You start building outside the single point of failure. You start asking, about every dollar you have, one simple question. If this door closed tomorrow, would it matter to me? And for a growing number of men who have lived through exactly what Harmon, Bellamy, and Doyle lived through, the answer they are working toward, patiently, deliberately, is no. That is the real retirement plan. Not a number, a position, a posture. A man who cannot be frozen, cannot be locked out, cannot be told to wait by someone whose name he does not know for a reason he was never given. Choose liquidity. Choose distribution. Choose to never again let one signature on one form decide whether your own money is available to you. Can't freeze what isn't concentrated. Can't lock what isn't singular. Can't leverage a man who already assumed the door might close. The men who saw the freeze coming before Wall Street did were not smarter than the analysts. They were simply the ones who had already been burned once by a system that promised them certainty and delivered discretion instead. And a man who has already been burned does not wait for the second warning. The question was never whether the door would close. It always does, eventually, for someone. The only real question is whether you built your life around the assumption that it wouldn't, or whether you built it quietly for the day that it did.